Heavenly Father, just so thankful for this afternoon that we have. Lord, as your people have arrived, open our hearts. We invite your Spirit to be here. Bless Dr. Sandoval as he opens up your word and presents this presentation. Let our minds and hearts be clear. And we thank you and guide us. Let your name be glorified. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. This is the most dangerous time of day to present because it's a good time to take a nap after lunch. And so you don't have permission to sleep, but you do have permission to stand. As a teacher, I tell my pupils, my students, if you feel sleepy, you can stand, that's fine. You can walk, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if you sleep on me, I might come out and step on your toes. And I actually do that to my students, but might not do it to you. It's a little bit long reach, except for Debbie. And so on. But we're going to carry on from where we left off last time. We were looking at lessons from COVID, and we were in the middle of the section, Question What You Think You Know. Question what you think you know. And so we're just going to carry on from where we left off, and that is at Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Now, it's deceitful above what? Above all things. Well, how deceitful is Satan? Well, we know that he's very deceitful. It says the heart is deceitful above all things, right? I have come to understand that Satan has a particular role at a particular time, and it's different than what we understand. In the context of human nature and our upside downness and our backwardness and our sinful fallen nature and the hearts that we have, Satan has nothing to fear. Nothing to fear, because our hearts beat in harmony with him, and we will follow him every step of the way, even thinking that we are religious and that we're doing good things. The role of Satan comes in when the role of God begins to intervene in that deception. And when the grace of God begins to reach in and to extract an individual from the deception, and by the power of the Holy Spirit to begin to wake them up to the truth and to see the light, that is when the role of Satan comes in, so that he might try to counterwork that work going on in the life of the individual and hold them in the bonds of deception. And because why? We have been believing lies, and we continue to believe lies, and the enemy holds us captive by those lies because he himself cannot hold us captive. He knows the only one that can hold us captive is ourselves. But he holds us, quotes, captive by giving us the lies, and the lies that we believe, then we are held captive by those lies ourselves. And the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. How deceitful and wicked is it? Well, we're told in Isaiah 64 and verse 6, but we are all like an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are like filthy rags. So the good we do is not good. Why? Not because it's not good what we do, but the motivation behind what we do, it is not good. And God does not count good the thing that is done, but the motivation behind the thing that was done. You see, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. That's the thing he considers. What's the motivation behind what somebody does? You take a little child who loves its parent, and it might make a mud patty and love, bring it to that mommy through the house and across the carpet, and present this wonderful treasure to mommy because they love mommy and want mommy to be happy, right? But there's a trail of mud through the house and across the carpet, you know. So God is very happy with that offering of mud in a desire to make him happy. W.D. Frazee, he made this statement, and I thought it very much simplified things for our life. And that is, do you want to make God happy? Yeah, sure, okay. Then do what you think will make God happy, and that'll make him happy. Right? If you want to make God happy, do what you think will make God happy, and that will make him happy. But while you're doing so, you might be doing some things that are creating a mess and dropping stuff along the way. Okay, but as you continue to do things that make him happy, he will change you. He will mold you. He will transform you so that you learn better ways to make him happy than you were before. But he is interested in the heart and why we do what we do. And so somebody may be very close to him who looks like they're messing up incredibly on the outside because there is a motivation of seeking to make him happy, whereas we might have somebody else that's very polished on the outside, but it's for the sake of self, right? So we can be really backwards, really backwards. Paul said in Romans 8 and verse 7, the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. This sinful heart, the human nature, is not subject to the law of God. It cannot be subject to the law of God. It's impossible for it to be subject to the law of God. Why? Because it sees loss as gain, and it sees gain as loss. And so it sees everything backwards, and the heart always goes for gain. It always avoids loss, but it goes for what it believes is gain, and it avoids what it believes is loss. And in the sinful context, it's completely backwards. So that which the law tells us we should not have and we should not go for, the heart just yearns after that. And that which the law says, this is what you should have and where you should be, we go, it won't work. It just ends up being a battle the whole time. Revelation 3 and verse 17, you say, I'm rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, right? You can be naked thinking that you're completely clothed. Do you remember the king with his new, the new clothes, or the king, I don't remember what the story was called, but anyways, the idea of that king that had the great tailor. And the tailor was so great, he could make transparent clothes. And so the king goes, flaunting out through town with his new wonderful clothes on, and he's walking around naked in town. He's proud, and everybody's laughing at him. That's the human nature, right? That's the deception. We are just so deceived. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Deceitful in which direction? Well, it says right there, into wickedness. Now you take a ball and you stick it on the side of the hill. Which way is it going to roll? Down. If you stick it there 2 times, how many times is it going to roll down? Twice. If you stick it there 10 times, how many times is it going to go down? 10 times. If you stick it there 1,000,000 times, how many times is it going to roll downhill? 1,000,000 times. Every time you stick it there, it's going to roll downhill. Now in the human heart, downhill is wickedness. It's wickedness. The human heart will always go for wickedness. It'll always go for wickedness. And of course, what's the opposite of that? It's righteousness. So it will always avoid righteousness. It will always go for wickedness, but it will do so thinking it's going for righteousness and avoiding wickedness. Right? That's the craziness, the craziness. Now it says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. What does it mean to be desperate? Well, imagine that you're off in the desert, and you've been there for a few days, and your water has run out long ago, and it's hot, and you're sweating, and you stop sweating because you don't have enough water to sweat anymore. Your temperature is increasing. You've got this pounding headache. You're sick to your stomach. Your lips are already cracked and bleeding. Your tongue is stuck to the roof of your mouth, and you know you're going to die soon. And off in the distance, you see this table with a nice pitcher on it with water, and it's glistening. You can tell it's cool. Are you desperate for that water? Yeah, sure. Now, what happens if you have a huge cactus patch between you and that water? And it's too big for you to go around, It's too thick for you to pick your way through, without any consequences associated with it. So you got to face some serious poking. Will you brave the cactus to get to the water? Yeah. Why? You're desperate. You're desperate, right? What is that water to the human heart? It's wickedness. It's wickedness. The heart is desperate for wickedness. Desperate for wickedness. People climb mountains, right? Anybody here ever climbed a mountain? All right, so we got a few. My father was a mountain climber. He grew up in the West Coast, and so he climbed Mount Hood and Mount Shasta and the Three Sisters and Mount Rainier and a number of the other mountains and so on. And, I've never had the opportunity of climbing up a mountain. I've skied down mountains before, but, then you get the lift to take you up the rest of the way. But there's some people, and they do the top peaks of the top, they'll do the 50 peaks for the states, Florida, I'll do that one. There's a city in Florida called Mount Dora. There you go. That's your mountain. So your top elevation is what, around 300 and some feet or something like that in Florida? Well, big deal. But if you're doing the top 50, you got to hit Mount McKinley. Right? In Alaska, that one's not going to be easy. And if you really want to hit the end-all, be-all of mountains, which one are you going to climb? Everest, that's right. Hundreds of people have died in the attempt to get up to the top of Everest. Why? Why would you do something like that, right? You face death so you can do something. Well, God has created us with a desire, an internal drive for us to always strive for more. Right? You're not going to sit on a cloud singing the 10 millionth verse of Kumbaya in heaven and be happy with that. No, we're going to be studying, we're going to be learning, we're going to be growing, we're going to be exploring, we're going to be, God has created us to be able to see and accumulate and desire more and more and more. And so that drive put into the human heart, you've got individuals that will then climb mountains like that. And what happens when you get to the very top of the mountain? Right? Oh, it's exhilarating. That's right. You're up there and you're just like, oh, this is wonderful. I made it to the top, made the absolute, and you can see everything around and it's just wonderful. But what happens if your whole world is upside down? Where'd you just get to? You just made it to the very bottom. Exhilarated that you made it to the top. Very bottom, thinking you made it to the very top. That is human nature. That is the deception that each and every one of us is born into. Every one of us, right? None of us excluded. So we think we're happy and healthy, but we don't know that we're wretched and miserable. We think we're rich, but we don't know we're poor. We think we can see, but we don't know we're blind. Blind leading the blind. We think we're clothed, but we don't know that we're naked. Right? Crazy, deceived, delusional. Now imagine with me that you have someone who is mentally ill. They're living in an alternate self-destructive reality. And in order for them to be well, they must take a certain medication that can make them well, but they believe that that medicine is poison. And there is a poison that is out there, but they believe that the poison is medicine. And so they constantly go after the poison, trying to drink it, thinking that it's medicine, and they avoid, like the plague, the medicine, which they think is poison. Now, you cannot force them. You cannot take away their will, even though it's a crazy will. You must preserve the sanctity of their will, but by the deception that drives them, they go for the poison and they avoid the medicine. How are you going to fix the situation? What are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you, in my mind, this represents the difficulty God faces. This is the difficulty that God faces. Now, it's easy to create a planet. It's easy, from God's standpoint. I'm thinking I can't create anything. For me, it's impossible anyways. All of it's impossible. From God's standpoint, it's easy to create a planet. But how hard is it to take someone who's crazy, and you must preserve free will, and they use their craziness to destroy themselves and others, but how are you going to rescue them back from it? Yeah. That craziness is the sinful nature. And God has a plan. He has a plan, but we see that plan as poison because it requires the death of self. Self doesn't want to die. No, doesn't want to die. So I've got a plan. I think my plan is medicine, but really my plan is poison. And I just go against, and I avoid, and I do the wrong things. We're crazy. We're crazy. We are crazy. You want proof that you're crazy? If you go out the brown door, I'll pay you $1,000. If you go out the black door, you pay me $1,000. Which door are you going out? You're going out the brown door. Everybody goes out the brown door. There's not an exception. I have talked to thousands of people all over the place in many different countries. Everybody, without exception, goes out the brown door. But what did Jesus say? Well, Paul mentioned it, Acts 20 and verse 35. It is more blessed to give than to receive. It's more blessed to give than to receive. So if you were faced with giving versus receiving, and you were undeceived, which door would you go out? You would go out the black door every time. Without question, without murmuring, with great joy of having gained by going out the door of giving. Why is it that we go out the door of receiving? We're crazy. We're backwards. We're upside down. We see everything wrong. And we respond perfectly according to how we see it, which is backwards and upside down. Right? How do you keep something? Well, of course, you stick it in a safe, you hold on to it, you if they start pulling it away, holding on to it tighter, and so on, and you hide it away from others, and you keep others away from it, and all that kind of stuff. That's how we keep things, isn't it? But what about his kingdom? He says in John 12:25, he who loves his life, holds on to, keeps his life, will lose it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. The only thing that you can keep is that which you give away. For everything you hold on to, you will lose. You will. How much can you take with you when you die? Absolutely nothing. So everything that you hold on to, you will lose it. It's guaranteed. And the only things, because God has put a plan together, the only things that you can keep are the things that you give away. But if given the opportunity, what will we do? We'll hoard. And we lose. Why? Because we're crazy. We're crazy. We're upside down. We don't see it the right way. What can this selfish heart, this selfish love, this selfishness do? Well, it can speak with the tongues of men and of angels. That selfishness can have the gift of prophecy. That selfishness can understand all mysteries and all knowledge. That selfishness can have faith so that I could remove mountains. That selfishness can bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and that selfishness can even give my body to be burned in the flames. A martyr's death, apparently one of the saints, but I could do it all for self's sake, for my reputation, for my name, for my family heritage, or whatever it may be. And if that is the motivation for the good things that I do, well, Jesus has a response. Matthew 7:22 and 23. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, done many wonders in your name? These are the superstars of Christianity. These are the miracle workers. These are the exorcists. These are the prophets. We would look at them and we would go, oh, can I fall at your feet and follow you around? Right? Weren't you talking about following this morning? We would follow them. Right? But what does Jesus say? I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. How could he say that? Because the law is about love. Selfless, self-sacrificing love. And if what I do is out of selfishness, is it according to the law or not according to the law? Even if I don't commit adultery, even if I don't murder, even if I don't steal, even if I don't do any of those other things, even if I outwardly appear that I have kept the law in its entirety and I am an upstanding member of the church and citizen and society and all of that kind of stuff, but if I've been motivated by selfishness, it's all lawlessness, and he doesn't recognize it as his own. What are we talking about today? The gospel? Sorry, this doesn't sound much like the gospel, does it? Well, if you don't know the trouble you're in, you don't know you need a Savior. If you can't see the problem that you're in, you'll never call out for one to rescue you because you can't rescue yourself. Most people will not go through some extensive surgery until they know the gravity of the diagnosis that requires that surgery. And I'm giving the diagnosis. So we cannot trust ourselves. We cannot trust our evaluation of information to determine if it's true or false. We are not the standard by which truth is determined. But there must be a standard that we didn't create, that is accurate and that cannot change, and we can then compare our estimate of information with that standard to determine whether we are correct or not. So if our estimate matches the standard, then we can know we're right. And if our estimate does not match the standard, then we know we're wrong. So what is the standard we must use? What's the standard? Well, lesson number 3, only rely upon something unchangeable. Only rely upon something unchangeable. If it's changeable, don't rely on it. Right? Now, how is that applicable in COVID? I mean, these are lessons from COVID. Yeah. How is the information coming at you? Is it always the same? Constantly changing. Right? 1 minute, don't wear masks. Next minute, wear masks. Minute after that, wear 2 masks. Right? 1 minute, surfaces are dangerous. Next minute, no, surfaces are okay. You know? It's always changing. If you stand upon what's changing, you'll always fall. Isaiah 8 and verse 20, to the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, it is because there's a lot of light with a little darkness in them. No? There's no light. No light in them. Right. So when it talks about the law and the testimony, what is it talking about? All right. Well, it's talking about the law of God. Right? The testament is what? Or the testimony? It was the ark of the covenant. It was the ark of the testimony. Right? Both words, the law and the testimony, refer to the 10 Commandments. Right? That's just reiterating one of those teaching patterns in the Bible of repeating something in a couple of different ways to reemphasize the same thing. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So it is God's law. It's the 10 Commandments. The first commandment says, well, thou shalt not. And the second says, thou shalt not. And the third says, thou shalt not. And the sixth says, thou shalt not. And the seventh says, thou shalt not. And the eighth and the ninth and the 10th say, thou shalt not. There's 8 of them that say, thou shalt not. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven images, right? Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet, right? There's 8 thou shalt nots, and every thou shalt not in the 10 Commandments essentially says, don't take from here, don't take like this, right? Don't take from false gods. Don't take from idols. Don't take like this by taking my name in vain. Don't take from here, from people, and so on and so forth. This is not where you take from. If you eat the words and actions of others and internalize them, you get frustrated and angry with them, and eventually that leads to murder. If you see someone else as your source of pleasure, that will lead to adultery. If you believe that what others have should belong to you, you'll steal. And if you want to be what others are, then you will take reputation from them, and eventually at some point you'll end up putting them down so that you can feel bigger. And the other pastor was talking about that this morning. And so on. And you'll just go ahead and break all the 10 Commandments. So 8 of them say, don't take from here, don't take like this. That leaves 2 left. The 4th and the 5th. And the 4th says what? All right, remember, as if we would forget. Remember the Sabbath day. Why? Why are we to remember the Sabbath day? Because He created everything. God is the source of everything. He's the source of everything you need. You have needs? Sure you have needs. God created you with needs. And He has everything you need. Right? He's the source of everything that you need. So come to Him and take everything that you need. Come and take and take and take and take. And be as full as you want to be with what God has available for you. Come and take from Him. That is the essence of the relationship with God. The relationship with God is not a relationship of me giving Him something He doesn't already have. Can you give God anything that He has not already given you in the first place? No, not at all. It's impossible. The relationship with God is not a relationship where we come and give everything to Him. It's a relationship where we come and take everything that we need from Him. He's the source. He wants us to plug in. But then what do you do with it? All right, the 5th commandment says we are to do what? We're to honor. Is honor taking or is it giving? It's giving, right? So we are to give honor. Now, how can we give honor? You can't give what you don't have. Can't give what you don't have. So if you're going to give honor, what do you have to do? You have to take honor first. Where do you get honor from? From God, right? So you come and you take all the honor you need from God, and then you've got honor to give to others, right? Even your parents, right? The one you take from, you're dependent upon. Let's imagine that you're going and you're looking for some country property. Anybody thinking about getting out of the cities and into the country? If you haven't already, yeah, okay, yeah. So let's imagine you found this nice place, mountains, nice river going through it, and it's beautiful. And upstream there's this farm, and in the middle there's another farm, and downstream there's another farm, and the one in the middle is for sale, and it is just the right price. And so you buy it, you know, with all the elevating prices, you actually get in on this one, and you get it. And it's wonderful. It's got wonderful water. You can drink it, and you can bathe in it, and you can water the crops with it, and you can stick a hydroelectric generator in there so you can run your own electricity, and it's got enough water pressure to run upstairs shower and everything like that. It's just great. And one day, the farm downstream from you, they decide that they're going to start some kind of manufacturing process. They build a factory there, and they suck this water into the factory and then spit this stuff out the other side, and it goes downstream. Does that directly affect you? No. It doesn't directly affect you. Because you already got all the clean water that you needed. You got your hydroelectric power. You're doing all that kind of stuff. The water comes out of your property, and then it goes on downstream to the neighbor. What they do with what the water that comes through their property, that's their deal. But what if the neighbor upstream from you decides that they're going to do the same thing? Does that directly affect you? Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It affects you. You are dependent upon the one you take from, but you're independent of the one that you give to. So according to the law, who is it that we are to be dependent upon? God. Who else? God. Who else? God. And who else? God, right? We are to be dependent upon God and God alone. And when you come to God and you take His love, it's a selfless, self-sacrificing love. So what kind of love do you give to others? Same thing. It's a selfless, self-sacrificing love. So if you've got good coming in, you're going to have good going out. If you've got bad coming in, you're going to have bad going out. So if the giving is bad, that's only an indication of what the taking has been. So everybody's trying to fix the giving, right? They're trying to fix the output. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I shouldn't have responded that way. Oh, that was probably not a good thing to say. Oh, I shouldn't have done that, and so on. And so we try to fix the doing, but the doing is only a manifestation of what the taking has been. So if you want to fix the doing, if you want to fix the speaking, don't fix the doing and the speaking. It'll never work. What do you fix? The taking. Where are you taking from? Right? Who's your source? If God is your source, you will give good things just like God does. If you're not giving good things, it is a clear indication you're not taking from Him. Right? It's one of the ways we can realize whether we're crazy or not. So, The law tells us we are to take from God everything we need in order to give to others, and this is the definition of what love is. Love is taking to give. Taking to give, taking to give. Now, this is the law, and we can use this law then to evaluate everything else, every other thing out there. This is stable. This cannot change. It is the unchangeable standard by which everything else must be measured. Taking to give. So now let's measure the words of Jesus by the law. Oh, hang on. Yes, let's measure the words of Jesus by the law. Matthew 22, 37 to 39. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. All right, what is this saying and what is it not saying? All right, it's saying, you got it. It's saying take to give. So when it says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. You know what that's not saying? It is not saying, give God everything with your heart, give God everything with your soul, give God everything with your mind. It's not saying that. Although that's how we read it. And then give your neighbor everything. Right? Have you ever tried to water two plants? Right? Let's say we're going to water this plant and that plant. And I've got both ends of the hose. Right? So I got one end of the hose, I got the other end of the hose, and I'm going to water both plants at the same time with both ends of the same hose. How well is that going to go? Yeah, not well at all. Right? So if this is not saying that I need to water God and I need to water others at the same time, it's never going to work. You'll always fail. You'll always fall short. You'll get frustrated. You'll try again and again and all that kind of stuff in your craziness and my craziness and so on, and it'll never work. That is not what Jesus is saying. That is not the love he's talking about. What love is he talking about? It's taking to give. You go and you plug your hose into the faucet, which is God, and then you take everything he's got. And then how hard is it to water your neighbor? Natural. Natural. It's easy. Yeah. When you got the right source, oh, it's easy. It's easy. So we see that the law of God is the foundation of all spiritual laws, but what's the foundation of all physical laws? Well, there's a fundamental law of nature, and it has two pillars. One of those is that nothing exists from itself. That means that all things are dependent upon resources outside of itself to function and to live, right? I mean, you need oxygen, and you need water, and you need food, and you need all these different things in order to live, and it's true for everything that lives and everything that functions. It must have power, it must have resources outside of itself in order to function or to live. And the second pillar is that nothing exists for itself. Everything takes in those resources in order to pass something along to others. And the others are then benefited by what you pass along. And it's true for everything in creation. Everything functions by taking to give. Oh, does that sound familiar? Where did we just hear that one? The law of God. And it has physical implications as well, like thermodynamics. Right? All energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside that system. That's what we learn from thermodynamics, but it comes from this law that everything must take in order to give. And this law is the law of God. Cause and effect comes from this as well. That tells us that every effect must have a cause and every cause must produce an effect. Because the effect can't produce itself, there must be a cause that's driving it. This comes from the fundamental law, which is the law of God, or as I call it, the law of life. And the spiritual implications of this is that all of us are channels. Every created thing is a channel through which God's life, his power, and his resources flow to others. And all created things use those resources in order to give and to support the life and function of others. And that is unselfish love. That's unselfish love. So the law of God, taking to give, is the foundation of all spiritual laws and all physical laws. And as we evaluate information, whether that information is physical or whether it's spiritual, we must interpret it not by our own standard, but by what? By the law of God. And if we consistently use the law as our standard, then we will all accept the truth, we will all reject the lies, we will all come to complementary conclusions, because not all of us are looking at the same points or the same aspects, but that's okay. But it'll complement each other. There will be no contradictions because there's no falsity or error in it. You only have contradictions when there's error. Wouldn't that be nice? Ah, beautiful. That's right. So our lesson number 4 from COVID is the cause of disease is different than we thought. The cause of disease is different than we thought. So imagine a road, and that road represents health. And on that road, of course, if you have health, there's proper function, and it's comfortable. Things go well, things function well, things feel well when you're on the road. And there are certain things that you need in order to remain on the road, of course. You need like oxygen and water and food and warmth and so on and so forth. And all of these different things you must have. And if you get off the road, then there is dysfunction and there is discomfort when you get off the road. And there is something that defines whether you are on the road or whether you are off the road. And the thing that defines whether you are on the road or off the road is law. Law defines whether you're on the road or whether you're off the road. So let's take warmth as our example. Let's say that you have a law that governs your body temperature, and your temperature should remain within certain limits of temperature. Some lower limits and some upper limits. Now, what happens if your temperature goes above the upper limits of the law that governs your body temperature? How do you feel? All right, you feel hot. Is hot comfortable or uncomfortable? Uncomfortable. Now you have discomfort. That's called symptoms, right? So now you have symptoms of feeling hot. Now what do you do when you feel hot? Yeah, you fan yourself, get some cool water and drink it, get out of the heat, get in the cool, jump in the pool, go slip and sliding with the kids or something like that, right? You do something in order to cool down so you can bring your temperature back down, and once you get back within the confines of the law that governs your body temperature, guess what? Feels good, function well, life is good. What happens if your temperature goes down below the lower limit of body temperature? Now how do you feel? Not good, right? You feel cold. You got symptoms again, different symptoms. But you feel cold. Why? Because you're outside the law. And you got to do something to get back. So what do? Shiver. Yeah. Increase your body contact, so that you don't lose as much heat. Maybe you go run, drink some hot tea, do something, turn the heat on, put some extra layers of clothing on, turn the electric blanket on, whatever it might be, so that your temperature can come back up, so you can get back within the confines of the law that governs the function of your being. And when you're back within the confines of that law, guess what? It's comfortable. You have proper function. Things are working well. Now, what happens if you don't stop at symptoms? What happens if you keep going? Your temperature keeps going up. Where do you get to next? Well, you get to disease, right? Not only does it feel bad, it is bad. Maybe you have heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and, things are really feeling bad. Like when you were in the desert and, dying from a lack of water and overheating and all of that kind of stuff. It's absolutely miserable. Why? The farther you get away from the law, the worse it feels. By design. It's by design. Because the farther you go, the more danger you're in, and the more you need to do something in order to get back. And you might be willing to accept some help that you wouldn't have been willing to accept otherwise. All right. Of the two genders that are sitting in this room, I don't adhere to the fact that there are more than that. So of the two genders that are sitting in the room right now, which one will ask for help sooner? All right. So the females, the women will ask for help sooner. The men? If they had never discovered that there was a prostate, men would go to the doctor much sooner than they do. So everybody's afraid something's going to happen, right? So sometimes the men would die before they'd ever ask for help. But sometimes it feels worse before you die. And you might be willing to get some help so that you don't die in the process, right? And so, you might be willing to let somebody dump a bucket of ice over you if you're overheated like that, or help you to do something you otherwise wouldn't, so that you can get back into the confines of the law that governs the function of your body temperature, so you can get back to comfort and proper function. And what happens if your temperature keeps going down past just feeling cold? Bad stuff. Chilblains, frostbite, other things of that nature. It's really bad. It feels really bad. Why? Because you've got to do something about it right now, and you really got to do something, because if you don't, it's going to get really badder. I know that's not proper English, but we're in the South. And so I got to learn some of these things. And so you can, right? So you get back. It's by design. That discomfort comes when you get outside the law, and it gets worse the farther you go. So you've got a greater motivation to come back. Now, what happens if you don't stop at disease? Death. Both ways. That's right. And somewhere between disease and death, there's this gray zone called the point of no return. You're still alive, but, again, in the South, you ain't getting back. Right? You ain't getting there. Right? Anybody need love? Is it possible that love functions just like these other things? That there's a law that governs the function of love, and as long as you're within the confines of the law that governs the function of love, things function well, it's comfortable, it's healthy. But once you get outside of that law that governs the function of love, you can have symptoms and disease and death. Yeah. Now, symptoms are like the rumble strips. Are rumble strips good? The rumble strips on the side of the road? Oh, yeah, they're good. I like them. I'm alive today because of rumble strips. As I fell asleep after trauma surgery rotation in Loma Linda, I only had about a 10-minute drive down the highway, and I might not have been on the highway for even a minute. And I was in the second lane over. Of course, it was probably about 8 lanes, but I was glad it was only the second lane over. I woke up on the rumble strips after 36 hours plus at the hospital with trauma surgery and so on. Oh, I'm very glad for rumble strips. They're annoying, absolutely annoying. Do you like driving on rumble strips? Yeah, me either. But I'm glad they're there. Right? I don't like symptoms either, but guess what? I'm glad they're there, because they let you know something's wrong. So health is proper function, which is the effect of staying within the law, and disease is dysfunction, which is the effect of going outside the law. And symptoms and disease are like the rumble strips. They're good. They're good. Disease and symptoms are not bad, they're good. It's bad that you have them, but to be able to have them is good, because they help you to know something is wrong. Right? They help you know something is wrong. Now, what causes disease? What causes disease? Well, we just looked at it. Disease is dysfunction, the effect of going outside the law, right? So if you go outside the law, with another term that we use that is we say you break the law, right? So disease is the effect of breaking the law. So what causes disease? Well, breaking the law. So what can break the law? Can something physical break the law? Can this podium break the law? No? Can this stand break the law? Can the platform I'm standing on break the law? Can the screws that are holding it together break the law? Can the microphone break the law? Yeah. So nothing physical can break the law. Can something spiritual break the law? Yeah. Yeah. So only something spiritual can break a law. So what is it that leads that spiritual entity to break a law? Sin. Sin. Every disease, I'll emphasize this, every disease is the effect of a spiritual problem. Every disease is the effect of a spiritual problem. Because disease is the result of breaking law, and only something spiritual can break law. But it's not only the problem of the individual who has the disease, right? Satan can break the law, and he's spiritual. And he can create disease like in Job. Your parents can break law, they're spiritual, and that can get passed on to you in inheritance and so on, right? But every disease is the result of a spiritual problem. It just might not be your own, right? And we're told in 1 John 3:4, sin is the transgression of the law. Which law does sin transgress? I mean, when we think of this, which law are we thinking of? Yeah, God's law, the moral law, the physical. It's His law, whether it's moral or physical. Why? Because the 10 Commandments are the foundation of every physical law, and it's the foundation of every moral law. So what is the foundation of God's law? It's His character, which is love. So disease is the result or the effect of a love problem. And that love problem is sin, which is the cause. Disease is the result or the effect of a love problem, and sin is the cause. Now we're told in Medical Ministry, page 49, says the intelligent Christian physician has an increasing knowledge of the connection between sin and disease. He is constantly striving to perfect his knowledge of the relation between cause and effect. Testimonies to the Church, Volume 5, page 444. There is a divinely appointed connection between sin and disease. No physician can practice for a month without seeing this illustrated. If he will be observing and honest, he cannot help acknowledging that sin and disease bear to each other the relationship of cause and effect. Counsels on Health, page 37. It is a sin to be sick, for all sickness is the result of transgression. I'm bringing some heavy hitters here, right? And I know this is going to create controversy, but we got to see things, right? We got to see things for what they are, right? In dealing with our patients and our sanitarians, Medical Ministry, page 285, we must reason from cause to effect. We must reason from cause to effect. So if we believe the cause is the effect, or if we believe that the effect is the cause, we will never understand how something functions. For example, you have this situation where you have cars going off the cliff. Why? Well, because there's no guardrail, there's no markings, there's no signs, there's no nothing. And of course, the solution here is to put an ambulance down in the valley and clean up the mess afterwards. Does that make sense? No, unless you believe the effect is the cause. If you believe the effect, which is the vehicles crashing in the canyon below, if you believe that's the cause, then it makes sense to go there and fix that because that's the problem. But is it the problem? No. What should the fix be? Putting the guardrails up on the road, putting signs there, putting reflectors and all that kind of stuff, lowering the speed limit and all of that. You will always try to correct problems the wrong way if you think the cause is the effect and the effect is the cause. Always. And we will never fix the problem or find the cure. So we must understand cause and effect appropriately if we're ever going to find the right solution. Do you think that we have found the correct cause with COVID? You think we understand the cause? Not at all. Not at all. And so what are we doing? We're monkeying around with effects. We're playing around with effects as if they're the cause, and we're fixing the wrong thing. We're fixing the wrong thing. In order to get to the cause, we need to know which domino is first and what happened to that domino. Right? Because every other domino is only an effect. You get that domino chain, yeah, you have this one that knocks over that one, and then that one knocks over that one, and so on. But the cause really is the first domino in the chain. And when we look at the law of cause and effect, we need to recognize that every effect must have a cause. Every effect must have a cause. And every cause must produce an effect. And if the effect is present, then that means the cause is also present. Right? Should I go over that again? I know, it's post-lunch sleepy times. All right, that's probably the opportune moment. All right, while you're sitting in your chairs, that's fine. You can sit in your chairs. Raise your arms up. Raise your arms up. If you're not raising them up, I know you're sleeping. All right, arms up in the air. All right, raise them around. All right, kind of around in circles, round in circles, round in circles, round in circles. Oh, the other way. All right. Arms off to the side. All right, stretch far. All right, kind of to your back. And then around this way, and give yourself a big hug. Oh, that's good. All right, now you can wake up. All right, so let's cover this slide again, because I know half of you are sleeping. So every effect must have a cause, and every cause must produce an effect. And if you have an effect that's present, then that means the cause also is present. Because if the cause is removed, if it's taken away, guess what has to happen to the effect? The effect has to go away too, because it's not producing itself. It's the cause that's producing it. No effect can produce itself because it's dependent upon power. It's dependent upon materials and resources outside of itself in order to even exist or function. So you will never find an effect without a cause. Never. That means there is no such thing as chance. There's no such thing as chance. Chance is not a biblical concept. It's an evolutionary concept. There is nothing that is random. Random is simply our inability to understand cause and effect and draw the connection between the two. Right? The Bible tells us in Proverbs 26 and verse 2, the curse causeless shall not come. Shall not come. The Bible is telling us there is never an effect without a cause. There is always a cause. And Christ Object Lessons, page 84, in the laws of God in nature, effect follows cause with unerring certainty. And in Child Guidance, page 444, the will of God Himself, His will establishes the connection between cause and its effects. Who is it that's in charge of and controls every effect? God Himself. God Himself. So, let's look microscopically before we come back out to the larger picture. So you and I are made up of cells, 50 to 100 trillion cells. We have over 250 different types of cells in our body, and every type of cell has a particular type of function. And our cells are kind of like little factories, and of course factories produce a product. And each type of cell, its factories and its products determine what you can make and what you can do as far as your body as a whole. And if you lose a particular type of cell, then you lose that function in your whole body. Because, of course, the body's functions are dependent upon the individual cell's functions, right? For example, like type 1 diabetes, if you lose your beta islet cells, the beta islet cells are the only cells in the body that produce insulin, and so if you lose that type of cell, you'll lose the ability to produce insulin. Now you have no insulin, and you can't live without insulin, and so the only way you can live is if you take insulin from the outside, because it's not being produced from the inside, right? Now, a cause, whatever the cause may be, a cause will immediately begin to produce an effect. Immediately. Anytime the cause comes, it will immediately begin to produce an effect, but it may take a long time for that effect to become noticed, to be large enough for you to notice it. And it's generally believed, and I don't know how accurate it is, but anyways, it's generally believed that you need to lose about half of your cell population, whatever cell type it is, before you start developing symptoms associated with losing that type of cell. Half of your kidney cells before you start developing signs of renal failure, and half of your liver cells gone before you start developing signs of liver failure, and half of whatever the cell population is. So let's just imagine that you had 20 billion beta islet cells. I don't know how many you have. I'm just throwing that number out as a for instance, right? And let's say now you have the cause of type 1 diabetes that comes, and it starts killing off 100 beta islet cells every second. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. I mean, that's a pretty fast process, right? Well, at that rate, you're going to knock off 6,000 cells a minute, 360,000 cells an hour, 8.6 million cells in a day, 60.5 million cells in a week, 260 million cells in a month, and 3.2 billion cells in a year. If you have to lose half of your cell population before you start manifesting problems associated with it, it's going to take you 3 years and 2 months at that rate before you're going to notice you have a problem. But the entire time, the cause was producing the effect. It just wasn't big enough for you to see it, right? So some disease processes are faster, other ones are slower. Some might be seconds, minutes, or hours between the cause and its manifestation, and others, they might be years or even decades between the cause being in place and then the effect beginning to manifest. But if you are looking for the cause, and this is important, if you're looking for the cause of whatever it is, it must meet these simple criteria. 1, the cause must be in place before the effect was first noticed. Right? The cause must be in place before the effect was first noticed. So if you have some kind of condition or whatever it is, then the cause had to be there before you had the first symptom, the first manifestation of that thing. But it's also true that if the effect is still there, the cause is still there. Right? If it's an active process, there are disease processes. Now, I'm not saying that if you cut your arm off in a trauma, and now you still don't have an arm, that the cause for cutting your arm off is still there. Not saying that, right? Because that's not a continuing active process. But disease is a continuing active process, right? So if you have a continuing active process, then the cause is still there driving the process. And if the cause is removed, then the effect must begin to go away. So if you're looking for the cause, it must be there before the very first symptom, and it must still be there now. If it doesn't meet that criteria, it's not the cause. But that's what you're looking for if you're looking for the cause. Right? Now, the cells are dependent upon resources and power in order to function, just like an engine is dependent upon fuel and a spark to ignite that fuel, or something to ignite the fuel, whether it's, gasoline engines, it's a spark, diesel engines, it's pressure, compression. But you have to use electricity in order to generate the torque, in order to, the force, in order to be able to push that piston up, in order to increase the pressure and then the temperature and then ignite the fuel that's in there. So you have to have the fuel and you have to have something to ignite it. And according to the law of life, according to the law of God, everything must take in order to give. Everything takes in order to give. So the cells must take in the resources, must take in the power in order to then give something away. And that's how they function. That's how they live, as a channel. And the resources are things like your oxygen, water, and nutrients. Those are chemicals. And so your product is going to be chemicals as well. And everything that you take into your body, you have to take in through an organ or an organ system. So you need oxygen, so you're going to take that in through your lungs, through your respiratory tract. But how many cells in your body need oxygen? All of them, every single one of them. So how are you going to get it to every cell of the body? All right, it's going to be in the blood. And that's why we're told, of course, the life of the flesh is in the blood. Because it carries all of the nutrients, all of the raw materials, all the resources that the cells need in order to live. And of course, if you have bad circulation, if you block off circulation, then the cells can't get what they need and they die. Or if they get just a little bit, then they can only function a little bit. Now, your cells can extract what they need if you have a good concentration of that thing available to them. But if you have too little, then you end up with deficiencies. And if you have too much, then you end up with toxicities. So it's got to be in the right quantity, right concentration. See, we are learning how we function. Because if we don't know how we function, we don't know how we dysfunction, and we don't know why we have disease. And if we don't know that, we'll take anybody's story for it, and we'll fall for everything. That's why I'm covering this right now. Right? Now, it's true that not only does every cell function by the raw materials or the fuel, but they must function by the spark, the ignition. So where does the spark or the ignition come from? Well, cells need energy or power, and they function as electrical units. They regulate the concentration of positively and negatively charged particles inside the cell with resulting voltage and current and resistance, which are all electrical properties. What is it then is that delivers that to the cells so that they can have access to it? And what is it that controls the function of the cells in the body? It's not the fuel. The brain. It's the nervous system, that's right. Every function in the body is ultimately regulated and coordinated through the mind. Right, through the nervous system. And that pathway, what is it, that pathway that allows the nervous system to control and coordinate all the functions of the other systems? Well, it's through the nerves, but it's also through the endocrine system. The nervous system stimulates the endocrine glands to secrete hormones that then have the effect on the different cells of the body, and you have direct nervous interaction where the axons can release chemicals from the neurons that then the cells take in, and it causes them to change their function. Now, every system, according to the law of thermodynamics, every system necessary to function must have power outside of itself in order to function. Right? Must have power outside of itself in order to function. So where does the power, where does the spark come from for the nervous system to function? I'm not talking fuel. The spark. Okay. It comes from spiritual information. Right? Comes from spiritual information. You see, we are not just physical, we are spiritual. Right? We have both of those aspects in us. And just as you have an organ or an organ system to bring in everything physical that you need, you also have an organ or an organ system to bring in what you need. And that organ or organ system is the Spirit. Right? It's the Spirit. We're told in Genesis 2 and verse 7, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being, a living soul." That's right. So God took dust, added the breath of life. That was a living being. The dust became the body. The breath of life is the spirit. And that combination becomes the soul, right? Becomes the soul. So it's like having a computer, similar to that, right? So you have software and hardware. Software and hardware. Now, is the software hardware? No. Is the hardware software? No. When they come together in a computer, does one become the other and the other become the one? No, not at all. They don't at all. They each have their different components, right? But does either of them have function when they're alone? No. Does the hardware function without software? No, absolutely no function without software. Does the software have any function without hardware? No, absolutely no function without it. You only have function when you bring the two together. But the one is not the other, and the other is not the one. And when they come together, they don't become each other. They remain what they are. And so in us, we were created like that as well. And we're told in Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So in creation, and I'm not just talking about creation of man, I'm talking about creation as a whole. In creation, which came first, the physical or the spiritual? Who created? God did. That's right. And we're told in Genesis 1, and Genesis 1, it said God spoke and it was. And God said and it was. Right? God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said, "Let there be a firmament," and there was firmament. God said, "Let there be land," and there was land. God, he said and it was. Jesus said in John 6:63, "The words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life." Now, who was it that created all that there is? John chapter 1. It was the Word. And he was the Word that was made flesh and dwelt among us. And so he, the one who said, "My words are spirit and are life," he's the one who spoke everything into existence. And he said of his Father in John 4:24, God is spirit. You think if anybody knows what God is, it would be the Son of God, right? So from spirit came everything physical, right? From the spiritual comes everything that's physical, and we were created in God's image. So in us, it's the spiritual that's first, which then impacts and drives the physical. And so the spiritual information comes in through the spirit, is made available to the brain, the cortex of the brain, which then transfers that information. You can now see it as electricity, and you can do an EEG and so on. And that's transferred down the nerves to the different cells of the body, which releases chemicals, and those take them in, and then it regulates or changes their function, upregulating, downregulating, starting new processes, ending processes, and so on. And it's the soul, which is the combination of the nervous system and the spirit, that can think. It's not the brain that thinks. Your brain cannot think. Right? Your brain can't think any more than your toes can think, any more than the sandcastle can think. It doesn't matter how complex and how organized and how whatever it is, it doesn't have the capacity to do so outside of the context of the spirit. Right? You've got to have the spirit in order to have thinking. And today, we worship the brain. We do. It's like we have a brain cult in the Adventist church, We worship the frontal lobes, and we worship this part of the brain, and we worship that part of the brain, and all that kind of stuff. But the brain can't think at all. Doesn't have the capacity to do so. That's just the region through which the spirit works and functions and integrates, right? Genesis 1:26 and 27, God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And he is the God of truth. So what kind of spiritual information were we created to live by? Truth. Truth. We were created to live and function by truth. And if truth is the foundation of the spiritual information that we take in, does that do good or bad for the cells? Good. Does good through that pathway, through the spirit, through the brain, through the nervous system, and through its control of cellular function and so on and so forth. It leads to proper function as an end product. All right? But what if we take in lies or error as our spiritual information? Is that going to end up well? Yeah, bad. So if that's what the Spirit brings in, then that's what it's going to make available to the brain. It's going to generate something different that's carried down the nerves to the different cells of the body. Something different is released, and you're going to end up with dysfunction. Dysfunction through this pathway. Do you think we've understood disease well? No. We haven't understood it well at all. At all. Right? Now, I'm not saying this is the only way that it comes. I'm not. There's other ways for us to dysfunction. One of those is inheritance. Right? You've got DNA. You've got blueprints that are used to make products, used to make the structure of the cell and what the cell makes, the products that the cell makes as well. And so in inheritance, you get that DNA and those blueprints from whom? From your parents, right? And you get them when you're how big? Yeah, you get them when you're one cell. You had a half cell with a half cell that came together to make one cell, and there you go. You got it. From the time you're one cell, you have all the genetic information that you're going to get. Right? It just replicates, right? And divides and so on, and goes on from there. So a defect, if it's inheritance, then you have a defect in the DNA or the blueprint that occurred in the prior generation, and that defect is located in a section of the DNA called a gene. Now, you have genes, and those genes, each gene codes for a particular protein. So that once you get the product of that, then you have a particular protein. And a protein is responsible for structure and for function and for things that you produce. Right? So these genes are going to be responsible for structure, for function, and for products. And that defective gene is passed to the individual when there is only one cell. And from that one cell, all other cells arise. Right? So therefore, all of the cells contain the defective gene, every one of them. But only certain cells use certain genes. Not every cell uses every gene. The thing that separates one type of cell from another type of cell is that this type of cell uses this set of genes, and this type of cell uses this set of genes, and this type of cell uses this set of genes, and so they have different functions and different products. And they look different. They have a different structure, right? So only certain cells use certain genes, but all cells of a certain type which use the defective gene must manifest the dysfunction. Right? All cells of a particular type that use the dysfunctional gene must manifest the dysfunction. And the defect will not be localized. It will be everywhere that type of cell is. It'll be everywhere that type of cell is. And it's important to note that if you have a broken blueprint, it impedes or disrupts normal function. It never creates new function. If you have a dysfunction, inheritance, it never creates new function. It only disrupts what was existing function, right? So if you have somebody that develops colon cancer in a section of the colon, that cannot be inheritance. Can't be. By its very definition, it cannot be, because it must manifest in everywhere that certain cell type is if it's inheritance. And if it starts in one spot, cannot be inheritance. If you have arthritis that's in a few joints but not every joint, it cannot be inheritance because it must manifest in every cell of a particular type if it's inheritance. And it must manifest early, right? Must manifest early. So if you have it then manifesting later on in life, then it's not a question of inheritance. The question is, what's the trigger? Yeah, everything uses genes, sure. It's all genetic. I agree with that. It's all genetic because you have to use the genes in the process of making the product and so on. But then it's not inheritance. There's something else that's triggering it. A second cause for dysfunction is environment. In environment, you have temperature or pressure. You can burn, you can freeze, you can cut, you can smash, you can slash, you can do all that kind of stuff. And environmental causes damage structure, which then leads to dysfunction. So instead of hitting the nail with the hammer, you hit your finger with the hammer, right? And environment can cause localized trauma so that you burn one finger and the other fingers are okay. You smash one finger, the other fingers are okay, and so on. And if the damage is beyond the capacity to heal, then the effect can be permanent, like cutting off an arm. I've never seen a human grow back another arm. Right? We just don't have the capacity. But salamanders will. They have that capacity. Right? They'll grow them back. I've seen them do it. Smaller injuries that remain permanent usually reflect a dysfunction in the healing process. Right? If it's a smaller injury, it should heal. If it doesn't heal, then there's a dysfunction in the healing process. Right? And ultimately, that's not an environmental cause. And environmental stuff can only disrupt existing structure and function. It never creates new functions. A third cause for dysfunction is chemicals. Remember, we need chemicals in order to survive, in order to have our raw materials. And you can have too little, you can have too much, so you can have deficiencies and toxicities, or you can have bad stuff like poisons or envenomations or other things of that nature. And chemicals, your poisons, envenomations, toxicities, or deficiencies, they disrupt or stop existing processes which lead to dysfunction. They never create new processes. They never create a new process. They can only disrupt an existing process that's there. So let's take out as an example. Painful toe, right? There you've got gout. You've got it in this case, the left great toe there at the metatarsal phalangeal joint. We call that podagra. And what it is an accumulation of uric acid crystals, and it crystallizes because it's in a high concentration, and then it's pokey, and then it damages the area, and you get inflammation and pain and all that kind of stuff. It's very painful. And so, of course, if you give somebody a medication that decreases their uric acid level, then it will go away. And you fix the problem, right? The cause is uric acid. Well, what's the cause for coronary artery disease? Well, of course, it's cholesterol. And if you get a low enough cholesterol diet and stress management program and exercise and so on, then you can start reversing that plaque and so on. And so, of course, that's caused by cholesterol. And you get a breast cancer. Here's a male breast cancer on the left side. And and so maybe it's because of consuming high processed animal products. And so somebody's been eating bacon and hot dogs and bratwurst and other things of that through their life. And so now they end up with a breast cancer on the left side. That's the breast cancer. Female breast cancer is the most common cancer diagnosis we see at our lifestyle center. So all of these, of course, are caused by chemicals, and we recognize the various different chemicals that they cause. Or is it caused by chemicals? Well, there's a problem, and it's called diffusion. You take a substance, you mix it in a watery environment, and then guess what happens to it? Comes into an even concentration throughout that watery environment. It diffuses. Is blood a watery environment? Yeah. So things get into the blood, guess what? Same concentration throughout the bloodstream. If you want to know whether you've got gout, I don't send you down to the lab so that the lab technician can stick a needle in your toe to find out what your uric acid levels are in your toe. I send them there to take the blood from your hand or your arm. Now, how can I get it from your hand or your arm and know anything about your toe? Because of diffusion. I know that whatever chemical is in your bloodstream, it's going to be essentially the same here as it is down there. Now, can uric acid have a party and say, hey guys, let's accumulate over here? All right, let me ask it this way. Can sand have a party on the beach and say, hey, come on guys, let's make a sandcastle? No. No. You go to a beach and you see a sandcastle, what is your conclusion? Something other than the sand did it to the sand. Can a chemical have a party and say, hey, let's accumulate over here? No, it doesn't have the capacity to do so. So can it be the uric acid that causes the gout? Here you got somebody with gout in the left foot, but what's the uric acid concentration in the right foot? The exact same that's in the left foot. So how come you have the manifestation on the left foot and not the right foot? It can't be the chemical. But the chemical is used in the process, but it's not the chemical that's driving the process. And when you take the chemical away, guess what? The manifestation goes away too. And so we think that we fixed it by taking care of the chemical, but it's not the chemical that drives the process. Can't be. What's the cholesterol concentration in the artery right there by the plaque versus before the plaque versus after the plaque? It's the same. So why do you end up with an accumulation right there and it's fairly clean over here and over here? It can't be the cholesterol. If it was the cholesterol, it should look like this. You should get an even distribution throughout the whole tubes, but that's not what you see. So is it the chemical that's driving it? No, it's only the chemical that's being used in the process, right? Same thing with the animal proteins. When you eat the bratwurst and the hot dog and all that kind of stuff, you don't think some of that goes to your right chest as it goes to the left chest? So why did it start in the left side? It can't be the chemical that drives the process. Now, the chemical is used as a part of the process, but it cannot be the chemical that drives the process. Raw materials may cause dysfunction in a certain type of cell first, right? So if you have like a thyroid, if you have an iodine deficiency, you're going to see that in the thyroid first because the thyroid has the highest need and utilization for iodine. But it should be relatively even across that cell type, just like inheritance. It shouldn't be patchy. If you have thyroid disease with nodules, that cannot be chemical. That cannot be inheritance. Can't be. Right? Raw materials can be used as a part of a disease process. It can be used as a cofactor. And when you remove the cofactor, the disease process doesn't manifest anymore, but the raw material is not the cause because it can't create a process. Raw material is only used as a part of the process. And so next we have to talk about the fourth cause for dysfunction, and that is the mind. The mind as a cause for dysfunction. And for that discussion, we're going to take a half-an-hour break and come back at 3:30 because we're done for our time for this section. And we're going to pick up right here and carry on and look at the last two causes for dysfunction. And then after we do, we're going to look at the God of this world. Well, the God that this world follows, and we're going to see how it matches up with the God of the Bible. And we're going to see who we've been following in this whole COVID thing. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, what an awesome God you are. You have created us marvelously, wonderfully. Lord, help us to understand how we function. why we dysfunction the way that we do. Lord, help us to be intelligent, to reason from cause to effect. Help us to see the very beginning of the thing so that we might understand what we must do. And Lord, with that understanding, help us approach the whole situations that are going around us from a new perspective, that we might see it entirely differently, and that we might find the freedom and the peace in the midst of the pandemic pandemonium. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.